Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
Hello. I am back, and I have my guests for the second half is Professor Kamau Kenyatta. How are you today? Hello, are you frozen? Can you hear me?
I'm
I
great. I'm
can't
great. How
hear
are you doing?
you. Oh,
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
now I can hear you.
Can
Now
you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you. Now
Okay.
I
Good.
can hear you.
Good.
How are you
Okay.
today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I got in on the last part of your last guest for a couple of minutes. She's from Kenya, from Nairobi.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
And
yes. And
yeah, that piece.
With this being Black History Month, I decided I'd wear my African outfit today.
Yeah. I should have thrown one of mine today. I didn't think about it.
Uh,
That would
but
be a good
anyway,
idea.
because I do want to represent, I do.
Yes. This
What
is
were you
good.
getting? You were getting ready to say something about my guest before? Were you going?
Yeah,
And I thought,
I was gonna say that she's from Kenya. My name is a Kenya name. I don't know if she was Kikuyu or not, but I have a Kikuyu name. Kamau Kenyatta is a Kikuyu name from that name is from Kenya. But what she's talking about in terms of helping the women there. I was in Ghana in November, and the more we can do to help connect to Africa, the better it will be. You know.
yes. And in
Yeah.
fact, in her bio, the word Kenyatta was in her bio. And I
Yeah.
immediately thought of you. Yes.
Okay. All
So
right.
yes, that's amazing how the two of you end up on this, the same night.
Same
That's
night.
interesting. Yes. And we
It is.
are here to talk about Black history
Yeah.
and what's wrong with Black History Month and how we can correct it. So we got a lot to talk about. But
Yes, we do.
first, I didn't take a minute to pull up I was getting ready to pull up your bio, but you know what? I'm just going to give you the floor and let you share about Professor Kamal Kenyatta. Okay, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay. I am, as Ms. Thompson said, I am a professor of African American studies. I've been teaching it for the last 25 years or so at various colleges and universities. Right now, I'm at a community college here in my town, basically, but I'm at Lehigh University as well. And for years, I was at William Patterson University in New Jersey, in Wayne, New Jersey, in the department there. And I've written a couple of books. My ex-wife and I wrote the book Black Folks' Hair, Secrets, Shame, and Liberation. We first published that in 1996, and we uh, published it several times. The latest version, I think, came out in 2019, something like that. And my latest book is The White People Show: How to Understand Racism and Still Be Wrong About It. And that book is primarily written to Black people or African people, but many other people can benefit from its contents.
Yes. Speaking of which, I have the book right here. Yes, White
Okay.
People Show. And you know what? I want to take a few minutes to kind of talk a little bit about some things that you've talked about in this book. And one of the things that I found very interesting, let's see. Oh man. Okay. Let me share some of the topics. I mean, this book. Now, I haven't read the whole thing all the way through yet,
Yeah. Okay.
but I'm working on it. I've got so many books I've got to read, and it's not funny. But like white slavery and its relationship to racism exposed. You want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
White slavery. Well, what most people don't realize about the United States, and I didn't necessarily go into all of this in the book, but in the early part of this country, during the colonial period, during the 13 colonies, you had Black people who owned white slaves as well as white people who owned Black slaves. There was not that much of a distinction that was made at that point because the racism piece hadn't fully caught on. It didn't catch on to some time later when the country actually got more established. And so during that time, when you will hear people say that whites who were in this country, if you say that they were slaves as well, they'll say, oh yeah, they were indentured servants. They were indentured servants, but they were also slaves as well, all the way up until about 3 or 4 years before the Civil War. There's documented evidence of whites being enslaved. What happened is they wanted to attach the stigma of slavery to Black people and not white people, but white people were just as used just as much during the enslavement process here. Later on, what they did is they tricked them into believing that because they were whites, they had white skin, they were better than the Blacks who were in the same situation that they were, and that is the situation we find ourselves in today. They still believe that they're better just because they're white skinned, not because of any merit or anything that they've done. And so that piece of the history doesn't get talked about a lot. I don't hear you.
That's because my phone started ringing and I put myself on mute. But
Okay.
I was doing some research and found that up until the time that you're mentioning about the color thing, there were wealthy Blacks who came here. If I'm not mistaken, they came here and they were not here as slaves. And it wasn't, they were seen as, they were aristocratic.
Well, you had what you had Africans that had been on this continent for almost 200 years before Columbus and that group so-called discovered this area. There's well documented proof of that as well, done at Harvard University back at the end of the 19th century, and then additional work done during the 20th century documenting that. However, it doesn't get filtered down into the educational system.
Of course not.
But Africans were already here, like I said, almost 200 years before.
Wow.
The Europeans realized that there was something else in the world.
Right. And Joshua Thornton, he says, hello. Hello, Joshua. Thank you for listening. Now,
hello, Joshua.
Okay. So, I mean, like this whole, our history and CRT and all that kind of stuff, I want to kind of talk about that as well. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I can't even get my mouth twisted to say everything I want to say. But I want you to, let's talk about what's wrong with Black History Month. Share with us your thoughts.
Okay, what's wrong with Black History Month? I became aware of this actually more than 30 some years ago, actually, from my mentors. And I, like most Black people in the United States or in the world, we were confined to the history of Black people in the United States and what we've done since enslavement. So when you hear Black people talk about us historically, they'll reference it by saying, when we were slaves, we did this, and when we were slaves, we did that. Because they can't go any further back. If they do go further back, they will say, well, when we were in Africa, we were kings and queens. And I'm like, well, that's true, but everybody wasn't a king and a queen. Somebody had to grow the food, take care of the animals, do the blacksmithing, that were professors at some of the universities that were there. And so what is missing when we deal with Black History Month, kind of across the board, you have bits and pieces of it here and there, but in most programs, there is rarely any talk about who we were and what we did before the enslavement and colonialism came upon African people and the continent of Africa. We only talk about, and I'm not disparaging these people, because we should, and rightfully so, hold them up, celebrate them, and so forth. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and all, they played their role, but they are not the sum total of our history and our sojourn or who we are. And so and we never go back to Africa. We will say we are African Americans, but we don't know who we were, because the educational system is designed for us not to know that. And in
Absolutely.
Black History Month, we play into it by doing exactly what they want us to do. When we go back to the beginning of Black History Month, or what was known at the time Negro History Week, which was started by Carter G. Woodson in 1926, his express purpose was to celebrate and remember and learn the history of our people, the totality of our history. And Africa was a huge part of that. When you look at the earlier educators, like William Leo Hansberry, who was at Howard University for years, that was his main thing, talking about Africa. We got to remember who we were. Dr. John Henry Clark, Chancellor Williams, and W.E.B. Du Bois. And on the continent of Africa, Sheikh Anta Diop. I mean, all across the board, we're hearing about this, but somehow it doesn't get filtered down into our celebration during the month.
And you know,
we leave out the African part, and we just talk about the American part, and that's the worst part of our history to talk about.
And you know, I had the opportunity. There is an African museum in Orlando called the Bronze. I can't remember the full name of it, but it's all about Africa, all the artifacts and he talks about the different tribes and what they contributed. I mean, it is amazing. It is amazing. It has become a part of Disney's, for lack of a better word, a part of Disney. And so now there's a whole area that's dedicated to African history.
Right.
And it is amazing. I mean, when you think about, you know, who we are a part of, we are descendants of Africa. And when we understand the contributions that each tribe, each country that we came from, you know, and what we're known for. I know, like the Cameroon people, for example, one of the things, like they had all these artifacts with the big smile, you know. The Cameroons were known for their smile, you know, and so understanding that is so important. But I'm giving you, this is supposed to be you doing this stuff, but
we're having a conversation. We're having a conversation here.
I mean, just go ahead.
When we don't remember Africa, we get caught in the trap of white supremacy. So one of the traps, for example, is the first Black to do this, the first Black person to do that. When Barack Obama became the president of the United States, everybody acted like, well, this was the first Black man to have the intelligence to be able to lead a country like this. No. And he was the first Black man under a racist white supremacy system to be able to do that. But when you go back to Africa, you see Sunni Ali Bear, who was the first king of the Songhai Empire, and the Songhai Empire was bigger than all of Europe, comprised over 3,000-4,000 miles of width of West Africa. And Mansa Musa, Abubakari II, Kaya Magan, Queen Nzinga. We have all of these people that were leading empires. Then if you go all the way back to ancient Egypt, which, by the way, they don't want to concede that it was a Black civilization. And I'm just going to take a detour here for a second.
Go ahead.
Recently in the news, Kevin Hart was supposed to perform in Egypt. And he made a statement about, the Black people of ancient Egypt, his ancestors and so forth. And they canceled his appearance there because of those statements. They don't.
It's the truth.
Huh?
It's the truth.
They canceled his appearance there because they were offended that he even voiced the fact that ancient Egyptians were Black people and that the people who live there now are invaders. This was resolved that the ancient Egyptians were Black back in 1972 with Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop and his protege, Theophilo Benga, who was one of my professors at Temple University when I was there, at the UNESCO conference. They laid to rest the fact that the ancient Egyptians were Black, period.
But when you consider, two-thirds of the world are people of color. Two-thirds of the world are people of color. Well, yeah. Egypt is a part of Africa. Am I not correct?
Yeah, African people, people of color. And I rarely use that term, people of color, but the colored people of the world, which other than the white colored people, because white is a color, they comprise less than 20% of the world's population. They are the minority in the world. And so for myself, for example, on that point, I never refer to myself as a minority or Black people as a minority because we are not a minority.
We're not. We're the majority. But
the Europeans are the minority in the world. They are the minority in the world.
They are. But because they have consumed the power monetarily and particularly.
That's why I say that the white people show, they bombarded us so much with the white people show that we think that everything is white everywhere. And it's not. It's an illusion.
Absolutely.
But going back, the Egyptian piece is very, very, very important because it's part of our cultural heritage. But when the Europeans, and I just need to highlight this, when you talk about racism, white supremacy, which are the same thing, when you talk about a group of people who claim that they are superior to everyone else, what happens when they come across someone or some civilization that is clearly more superior to them? They either kill them, they discredit them, or they try to claim that they did it. And that's the case with ancient Egypt. They try to claim that ancient Egypt was peopled by white people at a time when white people were not that prevalent in the world. No one even knew that there was such a thing as a European in the world during the time of ancient Egypt, as it came to be known, as the Europeans came to be known. And so, for example, the first American Egyptologist, James H. Breasted, makes the statement that Egypt was peopled by what he called the great white race. and that black people, or Negroes as he called them at the time, and the Mongoloids, the Asians from the East, had no part in that civilization or any other civilization.
When we know that's not true.
What he doesn't tell you is, well, how did the Europeans get there? How did this great white race get there? Where did they come from? And why didn't they create something similar in their own home territory? But that's the beginning of it. But now, when we buy into the notion that Africans don't have a civilization, we don't try to go and include that in Black History Month, because we've been taught, we've been conditioned to believe. Let me read a statement to you that I use these statements in my classes. But some of the things that were said about Africa. This is Professor A.P. Newton in 1923. He said that Africa had no history before the coming of the Europeans. Hegel, let me go back here for a second, if I can find Hegel, because Hegel is so important. He says that, number one, I'm just jumping into the middle of the conversation that he was having, but he says that there is nothing harmonious with humanity to be found in this type of character, referring to African people. He's basically saying African people are not human. And then he says Africa should never be mentioned, for it is not a historical part of the world. Africa has done absolutely nothing. This is what he said. And when we leave Africa out of our celebration of Black History Month, we accept what Hegel and others like him have said. Africa doesn't have any civilization, doesn't have any history.
And that is not true.
And that's the problem with Black History Month.
I hear you. And the thing is, Black people, we need to educate ourselves. We cannot rely on school systems and or our society to tell us who we are. We need to find out who we are.
And we're in a dangerous position right now with what has happened with this CRT thing. It's not what it's really about. But what that governor has done is setting off a domino effect, because there are already 23 other states that are looking to do the same thing. We cannot rely on the educational system in this country to educate us about us. No. They will miseducate us about ourselves.
Every time. That's what they've been doing all throughout our whole history. That's why HBCUs are so important, because that's why HBCUs are so important, because that's where we learn. And I hate that I didn't go to an HBCU myself, but and as parents, it's incumbent upon us to educate ourselves and our children. And YouTube has a lot of information on it. And one of the things we claim that President Obama is the first Black president, but history shows that there were several presidents who had Black blood running through their veins.
They probably did. But what we don't have to do, we don't have to find ourselves in white people's history, in Chinese history, in Japanese history, or Indian history, because we have a history that eclipses all of that.
Yes.
Before I came into this knowledge, and by the way, the universities are not the places that you're going to go and find this information. The information that I have in general, I did not learn at Jersey City State College. Okay. I didn't learn it at Princeton when I was there. By the time I got to Temple, I was in the right department with Dr. Malefe Asante in the African Studies department. But most of the educational institutions their hands are tied. there's certain things that I say within class. I have to say it euphemistically, so that I don't get trapped in the political processes that happen there. And that's what we're walking a tightrope there. The information that I learned in the community from elders in the community that set me on the path. And if you want to find out who they are, you can. Their book is The Journey of the Songhai People.
And you know what? I'm going to put that in the chat so that people can check it out. What did you say it was called?
The Journey of the Songhai People.
S-O-N-G?
And it's song, S-O-N-G-H-A-I. When I first heard that term, when I went to the class the first time, I thought this was an African class. Why are we learning about Chinese people, Asian people? That's how ignorant I was, because I did not know that there was a place called Songhai. I had gone.
Now, is that one word or two?
One word.
Okay.
Songhai. Some places you will see it spelled H-A-Y, but it's pronounced I. Songhai.
Okay.
Songhai people. And I had gone all through grade school, middle school, high school, all through college, and I had never heard of the Songhai Empire. Never. And most people, some people tonight for the first time, they probably are just hearing that. So when I was in this class, I was asked, why are we studying Chinese people? And a mentor looked at me and he just smiled. He said, "Young man, you're gonna find out who you really are," you know. And that's exactly what happened. And see, when we go back and look at our history, see, we have to build a bridge back to the time and the place before we were enslaved, before we were kidnapped and taken out of power. That's the only way that we're going to get back in power. We have to see examples of us in power. When we look at our history here, there are heroic moments for sure. People of valor that we can look to as icons. But if you really want to see Black people running their destiny, look at the Songhai Empire. Look at the Empire of Mali. Look at the Empire of Ghana. Look at Queen and Zenga, Shaka and the Zulus. Look at the Egyptians. Look at the Ethiopians, the Congo. I mean, it's endless. We have so much. That's why I say you don't have to go to find yourself in Europe or find yourself in Asia or find yourself in the Bible even. Because we predate the Bible. When you think about it, for example, where did Moses go? Where did Moses grow up?
And what was Moses? Moses was a Black man.
In all probability, he was. But he went into Egypt. But they demonized Egypt. In the Bible, they demonized Egypt, and we turn against Egypt. But at the same time, the Europeans want to claim Egypt as something great that they did. You see the trick there? On one hand, we hate it because of what they did to the so-called Hebrews. But at the same time, the Europeans, they're loving it. And that was us. And we did these great, mighty things. No, that was not you. Well, in my classes, I have visual proof that
I want to come to your class.
You know, I show you the images of Narmer, Khufu from the 4th dynasty, Pepi, King Pepi II, the longest living monarch in the history of the world.
Wow.
They have a little statue of him over at the Brooklyn Museum that's in there. You can see this little statue of Pepi II. Clearly an African. King Tut. If we come down to Tut, you have a statue of this king. He's Black. I mean, charcoal black. But you know what the Egyptologists and the Europeans say about that?
What?
They say he's really a white man. that
That's
has
the
black
sun.
skin.
That has what?
The
A white man with what kind of skin?
black skin. He's really a white man with black skin. And so, with all of with these type of twists, they have stolen our history. Our history has been stolen, or the history has not been forgotten. It was deliberately wiped out.
Yes.
And it was
Yes.
replaced with a series of vicious lies. The
Yes.
African brilliant ape that can talk.
Yes.
African people are monkeys. And so we see every so often in a society that we'll see something, some imagery of something come up where they're showing black people as monkeys or apes and so forth. We have to ask, where did that come from? Now, when you talk about going back to Africa, what was there? What were we doing?
Wow.
Do you know? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm telling you, people need to go to that museum and they will see what we were doing. It is fun. I mean, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And it is probably the only place in this country that has such a vast exhibit of our heritage from Africa. Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Anyway, go ahead.
Now,
I'm sorry.
At the African American Museum in Washington, they do have this information there when you walk through, but most people don't realize what they're looking at when they look at that, because they rush to get to the American part. Just to talk about, well, if we think about what we were told about who we are, we were told that Africans never created anything, never did anything. We were jungle bunnies. We were just running around, being wild and so forth. And that is the complete opposite of what was going on when enslavement came upon us. When enslavement came upon Africa, Africa of all places in the world was best positioned to take advantage of the oncoming industrial revolution. But enslavement happened. And the invention of the gun, there's two things that happened that caused Africans to be defeated: the gun and the printing press. Europeans were able to, of course, dominate with the military, because Africans had no need for that kind of weaponry.
Right.
And the printing press helped them to spread their propaganda throughout the world. And that is the notion of white supremacy was able to be spread throughout the world. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of that. Now, going back to Africa, let's look at some of what was there. Number one, and I'm just going to deal with the song. Well, let me go back to the Malian Empire for a minute.
And you know what? I have pictures that will that support what you're saying. But I didn't think we were going to go that way. But I'm going to let you talk, and I'm going to see if I can pull up some of that stuff.
Okay. All right.
All right. Go ahead.
The Malian Empire. There's a king. When he comes onto the throne, there's a king, Sundiata. And there's a story about Sundiata. Now, to show you how prevalent this is, go to Amazon.com and type in the Epic of Sundiata. And this book will pop right up that will talk about this great king in Africa. But that book is never alluded to. He is never mentioned anywhere on our part in the history. And of course, he's excluded out of the educational system here. But the book is available on Amazon that tells his story.
Wow.
It's available. I mean, I like to say I don't like this phrase. They say sometimes if you want to hide something from Black people, put it in a book, which is not really true. either. But you have Sundiata, who lays the foundation of the Malian Empire, makes it a mecca of farming. They became great agriculturalists. And what was one of the things that they grew? Cotton.
Wow.
When you think about, when you look at the pictures of the ancient Africans, you see them in all these colorful, beautiful clothes. Where did these clothes come from? It was made out of cotton, which they grew, which means they had extensive knowledge of textiling. They could color those clothes. They could put all kinds of designs within these clothes. That's just one industry. Then you have Abubakar II, who comes along. Abubakar II builds a fleet of ships that he sends across the West African Ocean, because it wasn't the Atlantic Ocean, to see what was on the other side, if there was any land over there. And he told them to not to come back until they find land or if they run out of food. Only one ship came back after an extensive period of time, and he said the other ships had disappeared, and so they were running out of food, and they came back. But instead of deterring Abubakar II, he decided to build an even larger fleet of ships, something like 900 ships, and had them stocked with food and supplies and so forth. And instead of appointing someone to commandeer that, navigate that trip, he said he would do it.
Wow.
And he left his brother Khan in charge. He leaves, and basically he's never seen again in West Africa. But we know he was successful because when the Spaniards came into the Central Americas, when they arrived, they came upon these huge populations of Africans living amongst the Indians. Like I said, I'd already been living with the Indians for almost 200 years, the so-called Indians, I'm sorry. And the archaeological evidence, the fossilized evidence, the cotton that was found there made of a cotton germane specifically to West Africa, and so forth. Now, this was not done by Black scholars, this information. This information was done by scholars at Harvard University in the latter part of the 18th century. And they wrote about it, they documented it, well documented. The books were left on the shelves. An African-American scholar by the name of Ivan Van Sertimer discovered these books with this information. And he consulted with some of those scholars who had done that, and he rewrote the book, rewrote this information, and issued a book, published a book entitled They Came Before Columbus. You can find that book on Amazon and anywhere else. You know, that documents that these Africans were here before. But now he left his brother Kankan Musa. Kankan Musa becomes Mansa Musa, the richest man the world has ever seen. He takes a trip to Mecca because he became a Muslim. He took with him an entourage of 60,000 people. And he had 80 camels to carry 20,000 pounds of gold. And this gold was not for spending money. He just gave this out along the way because the African kings like to be known for their generosity. When he goes through Egypt, he spends so much money in Egypt, or gold in Egypt, it deflated the price of gold in Egypt for 10 years. It took 10 years for them to recover. Now, how do you forget somebody like that in history? How do we not learn about this person when we're in the third grade, the fourth grade? How do you get up? The Africans have nothing, they've done nothing, they've made no movements. If 60,000 people came through wherever you are right now, they would have a big impact. If 60,000 people just walked through your town right now, they would have an impact. We see the protests and you have what, 2,000 or 3,000 people out there, and it's like, wow, a lot of people. Imagine 60,000 people. Did somebody write about this? Of course they did. They wrote about it all over the place. It was a well-known fact. But Mansa Musa, he is one credited with establishing the University of Sankore at Timbuktu. He didn't create it because it was already there in the Ghanaian Empire, but he did so many renovations to it that he's the one giving credit for it, the University of Sankore at Timbuktu. Now, I'm going to jump to the Songhai Empire. You have Sunni Ali Bear, who becomes the king or the first king of the empire. And he becomes the king there. It becomes an empire. He becomes the king in 1464. It becomes an empire on January the 19th, 1468. We know the date and the time. That's in African history that we should be celebrating. The founding of the Songhai Empire.
Wow.
And one of the things that he did, there was a place called Jané, and it was surrounded, well fortified, and he wanted to bring this this kingdom into the Songhai Empire because he expanded. The Songhai Empire consisted of all the territory of the Ghanaian Empire and the Malian Empire, and it expanded that territory beyond that. He surrounded this place, and it took him 7 years for them to surrender. When they surrendered, he marched into the city, and the Queen Mother, who was in charge there, allowed him to come in, and he married the Queen Mother of that city. And Jané occupied the kings of Jané occupied a significant place in his regime. Now
this was a matriarchal society.
This is our matriarchal society, for sure.
Okay,
for sure.
Go ahead.
That's another whole piece to talk
It
about.
It is.
The importance of women. See, African women don't have to go through to find anything else. Just go look at your history and see who and what you were doing. They did a little bit of it with the king, the woman king that came out.
Yes, that was an awesome movie.
What they really need to do is Queen and Zinga, but that's another one. But I was gonna say
I'm sorry.
The Songhai Empire. He married the queen. Oh, when the enslavement came upon the Songhai Empire, when the Europeans started coming in there, African people who were brought over here, and the Africans used to sing a song. It's so-called spiritual. And the only lines that I know of this song is 12 gates into the city, hallelujah.
Yes.
They were singing about this city in West Africa called Jané, because many of them came from this city. This city was surrounded, it had 12 gates into this city. And so when the Africans were singing about this in code, the Europeans thought they were talking about heaven, going to heaven. But to get back to West Africa, to get back to home, was to get back to heaven for the Africans that had been brought here. And so we don't know. A lot of this stuff has been lost because we don't reiterate it. We don't repeat it enough for our children to remember and hear this stuff. We talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, and I do not take anything away from him at all. We talk about him infinitum, and most people have never even read most of his books. There is more to us, a lot more. We have a glorious, grand history that if we need to discover it, we will wake up to another whole.
I have these pictures, but I can't bring them over to this particular platform. But oh my God, I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that. Have you come back? You what?
I have this because when I'm teaching in my classes, I have the pictures and so forth.
I mean, I've got some phenomenal pictures from this museum, but I can't bring it over here because I'm not in my Google Chrome.
Now, the unfortunate thing about what we're talking about tonight, the unfortunate thing is that it's not unfortunate. What we may allow to happen is Now you have a lot of white scholars saying exactly what I'm saying right now. But people are hearing it like they discovered this information. They found this information. Because most of them don't tell you that they are relying on the information that they got from Carter G. Woodson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Williams, Leo Hansberry, J.A. Rogers. All of these people were talking about this information for decades, but they weren't given credit. We basically ignored them. It's time for us to acknowledge the work that has been done to keep alive our history and our culture.
Yes.
Part of what I was in Ghana, Accra, Ghana in November, and I got to visit some of the dungeons where they prisoned our people as they kidnapped them, and it's mind-boggling. But what you see in Ghana are the people. I urge everybody who is African and others, if they want to go, if you don't do anything else, go to Ghana. Because this was like the bottleneck from when they brought the captives. They came to the coast of Ghana and were shipped. They came from all over different parts of Africa. And that history there are people there that are waiting for us to come so they can tell us that part of our history.
Yeah.
And this is included here. Now, in the song High Empire, just let me just get this really out.
And you know what? I need to do a commercial right quick.
You need to take a break, okay?
I hate to do this because I want to, oh my God, we could go on for hours. In the meantime, I want you to, while I'm doing this commercial, in the private chat, put your contact information. I don't know if this is right or not. KenyattaSpeaks.com. Is that right?
KenyattaSpeaks.com. That's my website. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. That was from my memory.
yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Awesome. Well, let me play a commercial here. I'm going to play a couple of them and get them out the way so that we can continue this conversation. I am so glad you're here. And I'm glad that we're doing this the last day of Black History Month. Perfect.
Yeah, so we get prepared for next year.
Yes, absolutely. So, man, like I said, we could spend hours on this conversation.
Yes, well, we could. Now, I know that most people, and I said at the end of the last section, we can get ready for next year, because it seems that that's the time that we tend to focus on the history, even though we say we're going to celebrate it throughout the year. We usually don't. That's just fact. You get a little bit here and there. But what we like
Hello,
is a
Lenora.
systematic approach to our history. Most of us get a little bit here, a little bit there, a little from over here, but we don't see the whole picture because it's not taught to us systematically. So you have someone will get a little bit of piece of information about something here, and they just run with it, and they think that that's the be all, do all, and it's not. And they'll start some other type of thing. And I'm unfortunate. I'm not disparaging this. This is what happened with Elijah Muhammad and Noble Ali Drew. Both of them were in the Garveyite movement, but both of them left too soon. I understand why they left and what they did. And then both of them used religion, and I understand why they used what they did at the time and so forth. But our people need to be instructed on a systematic way. For example, what happened with me, and this was at the time that I was at Princeton and I went to study with these guys that were in the community. And the class that they were offering was supposed to last for, I think it was 26 weeks or something like that. It was supposed to last 26 weeks. We ended up being in that class for 3 years.
Wow.
Because it was so extensive. Once we started digging, they just kept giving and kept giving until we understood what they were imparting to us. And there were only 4 of us that came out of that class. There were like about 50, 60 people that came through that class, but they didn't stick. There were only 4 of us that actually graduated from that class, that stayed till the end. And that is my point, that we don't stick around enough to get the full story of who we are and what we are, so that we can make an impact. Because just to know this information doesn't really mean anything. That the issue is, the point is, what do we do with it? How do we apply it in our lives now? How does this information make a difference for us?
Tell me.
It makes us feel good, which it should. It should. But let me give you an example of something. The Songhai Empire. In the Songhai Empire, there are 4 major universities. The University of Gayo, which was the capital of the Songhai Empire, the University of Ulata, the University of Jané and the city of Jané, and the University of Sankore at Timbuktu. You have 4 major universities there. Now, in the preceding empires of Ghana and Mali, the number 1 and 2 commodities that were sold in those empires was salt and gold. When you get to the Songhai Empire, the number 1 commodity sold in the Songhai Empire is books. Manuscripts. And so, to show you how our history got distorted and lied about, they said that African people didn't read. And in the Songhai Empire, it's the number 1 commodity that's sold. You got 4 major universities there. People from all over Africa came there. People from the Arabian world came there. People from Europe came there. The Pope commissioned a guy by the name of Leo Africanus out of Rome to go and live in the Songhai Empire. I forget, I think he was there for about 15, 20 years, something like that. And he wrote these volumes. It's called the Empire of Songhai, 14 volumes. And you can go to the library and get those books. That's an eyewitness account of this Songhai Empire, what was there. This is before Columbus. This stuff is before Columbus. But now Sunni Ali Bear, the first king there, he dies in the year of all years, 1492. Sunni Ali Bear died. His death was commemorated throughout Africa, Europe, and Asia. He was a big deal.
Let me ask you something.
Huge
We
deal.
only got 4 minutes. Can you believe it? But I need to ask you, what are you doing outside of teaching this stuff as a professor? This knowledge, what you have to offer, it needs to get out in the masses. So, do you have a platform, or are you thinking about a platform where you can do this kind of teaching and education on a regular, like a YouTube channel or something? Are you thinking about something like that?
Yeah, I've thought about that. Our teachers, our mentors taught us to, why I'm able to give this information, because they taught us to be able to taught other people. And for years, I taught the class in the community. And then I started teaching at the college level and so forth. I would like to do something of this nature online. I eventually will. I'm sure that I will. It's just a matter of putting it together and finding the time to do it. But yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
because
I'm looking.
we perish from lack of knowledge. And we cannot rely on our government, our school systems, our
No.
educators to
Mm,
teach us who we are, what we bring to the table. And I recognize that Black History Month happened because Frederick Douglass and then the presidents, they were all born in February,
right.
and they wanted
But this,
recognition.
right. That's why Woodson put it in February, because a lot of people say, well, they gave us the shortest month of the year. No,
No, they didn't.
Woodson was a self-determining person. He decided that we'll have it in February because at the time because it was because of Frederick Douglass's birth, Lincoln's birth, and Washington. They were all born in February. So he put it in that month for that. But he did not mean for it to just be just a 1 month. It was supposed to be like, a culmination of it, but it should spread throughout. He actually wanted it to be put into the school system, but they've never put it in the school system.
No,
Never,
no.
never.
Our history, if they taught history the way it's truly supposed to be taught, it would not be as boring as it
Yeah,
has been,
yeah,
especially in elementary and middle school.
yeah.
You
I
know,
hated history when I was growing up. I hated it. I went all
me
the way through
too.
college. It was only until I was working on my master's at Princeton that it hit me one day, and it had something to do with something Malcolm X had said, and I
Right.
realized,
Well,
like, whoa, man,
yes. And with
history is the
me,
key.
yes, with me, what made me have an affinity for history, my history professor in college, this man, I mean, I bought the book, but I didn't even need it because as long as you went to school, went to the class every day,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Uh-huh.
got an A in history, because he was so animated and he made history so exciting, you
Yeah, and
know?
it's extremely exciting. But the way it's been taught, it's taught boring. It's designed to make us not want to do it,
And
and it's filled with so much lies. And most people know that it's lies. It's like, how can this man chop down a cherry tree and he never told a lie? I mean, come on, you know. Know the truth about it. The truth of history is interesting
it
because
is.
you're dealing with people and everybody's not perfect. And when I talk about ancient Africa, I'm not talking about a perfect place, but I'm not talking about this place that they have, this imaginary place that they've created for us that didn't exist. You know,
Right.
so
And we're out of time.
okay, it's been a pleasure. I thank you for having me on to do this the last month. And I've written an article about this. In fact, I'm going to change the article around a little bit and publish it now. Then, beginning of next year, I'm going to publish it again at the beginning of Black History, so people can be like,
Yes.
"Remember,
Yes.
look, y'all need to be talking about something else. You
Right. Right.
need to
And
include."
I'm going to actually, what I would like to do next February, Lord willing, I would like for you to create like maybe a minute every show to
Okay.
culminate this month, and then have you come back the last one, just like now, But every week of Black History, we're giving them some nuggets and some history, some bona fide history based on your knowledge and your education and your expertise and your know-how and all that stuff. This is
Okay.
this. Oh man, I hate that we got to end this. I really,
You can put
really
something together.
do.
You can put something together. I thank you for having me, Sister Vera, and I look forward
Thank
to it next
you. Yes, same
time.
here. And listen, audience, if you missed this, you need to just catch the replay because this man gave us wisdom. He gave us knowledge. He gave us information that we will never get in the school systems. So I appreciate you very much. And I'm just excited that we were able to share what we were able to share. And I mean, the time went by so fast.
Mhm.
Um,
That's what
But
usually happens in the classes.
I can imagine. I would love to be in one of your classes. You need to do some online classes, or you
Yeah.
need to do something.
There's a few things I have out on YouTube, but I was doing it for my classes. And I think I got them marked private or something like that. But things.
Come on, I'm telling you, you cannot sit on this knowledge and isolate it and limit it just to your classes. I mean, it's too valuable. It's too important, and it's too necessary.
Yeah.
So, okay, I need to shut up.
Thank you again.
Thank you, and I'll see you. God bless you guys. See you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Okay.
The Vera